All right, so welcome back inside the Now Morning Show. Thank you guys so much for being here with us. Still, it is 22 minutes after 7, and this morning we're going to continue the conversation on the Tobago Amendment bills. And this morning, joining us is Dr. Winford James, political analyst. Good morning to you, Mr. James. Dr. James.
Good morning. Good morning to your listener and viewership.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I want to get straight into it, because the Parliament hasn't been able to get the Tobago bills passed just yet. And I want to get your opinion on what you think went wrong. What needs to be changed? What needs to be adjusted? Why do you think we haven't been able to get that bill passed?
Well, first of all, the bills haven't got to the state where they can be passed. There has to be a special reading of the bill, usually the second reading of the bill. What the mover of the motion said in the Parliament on I think it's the 29th of June, because it started on the 28th.
Yeah.
I happen to remember because the 28th is and was my birthday. So
well, happy belated birthday to you, sir.
Thank you. I'm just saying. But the mover of the motion said that she was at the end of the discussions, the debate on that day, that she begged to move that the bills be read a second time at a later date, which suggested that that particular debate was the first reading. And therefore you could not have a vote taken because you had to go to committee stage and then come back for a second reading.
Right.
But the confusion is this, or part of the confusion is that last October, the bill was read for the first time in the lower house.
So technically this is the second reading then?
So that's exactly the point. The reading that we experienced must have been the second reading. But the move of the motion said that it was the first reading.
Well, weren't there changes made to the bill between October and when it was read?
Yes.
In June, right? So it was the first reading of this version of the bill, yeah?
Yes, because there was a lot of public consultation and so on.
Right. So then how do you feel about the lack of support for the bill and the whole walkout and all of that part of it that happened?
No, what kind of support are you talking about? Support from
Tobago? In Parliament.
Oh, but I don't know that the government said they're not supporting the bill.
Not the government, the opposition.
Not the government, I mean the UNC. They're not saying that they're not supporting the bill. They may not actually be doing so, but they haven't said that. What they have said is that there's a need for more consultation with Tobagonians, and I dare say Trinidadians, on the bill. That's what they're saying. And not enough has happened in that regard. And so the government gave them 2 weeks. Well, all of us, actually, we have until July 15th.
Right. Do you agree that there haven't been enough consultations?
That's difficult to say. Maybe there could have been more, because there are people who say that they didn't have an opportunity. Not only that, but critically, people are saying a volume of information presented for them to study in a short period of time. You remember what happened the weekend the JSC came up to Tobago? In fact, the whole consultation, it was a 3-day affair. And that 3-day affair came after the government, the JSC, had so much time to make their own adjustments to the bill. But they only reserved 3 days for Tobago. In that sense, the consultations did not cover enough for a period of time for people to get their views in, right? And the UNC has pointed to the voluminous document, over 500 pages, on the Parliament website, given to them what? I don't know. But Dr. Rowley responded saying that that document was on the website for a long time, so they should have been able to see it.
Right.
In other words, you could never have enough consultation, but I complain about the small amount of time that was given to Tobagonians when the JSC came to Tobago to discuss the two bills. In that sense, no. And then there are changes that are made, and we don't exactly know what are the changes that are made, which bills they are changed to, and whether because of the changes or amendments, they need to go back to the people. if you make adjustment that people did not see, right? It would seem to me that you need to give people some opportunity to look at the amendments you have made, right? Before you move on. In that sense, again, there may not be enough consultation.
All right. Now, there have been documents that have been going about. I mean, I even got so many messages in WhatsApp and stuff with basically, what the current THA Act 40 of 1996 is versus what the Tobago Autonomy bills want to give. Like the main points that people have been, saying could be the sticking points or whatever the case is. So there have been, at least to my knowledge, there have been documents that have been going out. There have been graphics that have been going out that give people a very clear breakdown of what it is. Now, admittedly, after reading the two bills, there are things that are not in these graphical representations, but that's because obviously you can't have all of it represented in the graphics. But what changes do you think should be put into the bill?
Changes to what is the first question? Because I don't know.
So what was proposed by the JSC?
Yeah, but you're going back to the first or the second reading. That's the point.
No. The current one that we have being debated now.
The current one that has gone to committee stage?
Yeah.
Even that one, we're not sure. Let me just explain to you what I am talking about. One of the superficial changes in the bills is the shift from chief secretary to premier. Everybody agrees that it's a superficial change. The Prime Minister justified the change because of the fact that hardly anybody knows about a post called Chief Secretary, but they know about Premier, right? That's in the debate in the Parliament on June 28th. So everybody knows that. So that change was made. When you look at the bills that were on the website and the bill that was introduced by the chairman of the JSC, Premier was not there. The position was called Chief Secretary.
Right.
So the question is, did the Prime Minister know, or was he ahead of the JSC in talking about the position of Premier, not Chief Secretary? Where did he get that from? Because you would imagine that his comments would be consistent with what the bills were saying.
Right.
But a clear difference.
But what is the difference between Chief Secretary and Premier? Is it not meant to be the same thing?
It's the same thing, but he was arguing that internationally, Chief Secretary is not recognized, so that the Chief Secretary will go abroad to international fora and so on, and not be recognized, because nobody has in their heads this notion of Chief Secretary. But I'm only making the point to ask, what version of the bill are we talking about? For example, again, I have seen amendments that give Tobago a definition, right? And then I hear, no. There's no definition of Tobago. It's what we have said from the beginning, or almost the beginning. What have we said? What we have said is that we can only define Tobago in terms of its inland, onshore mass, not its maritime boundary. We cannot go there for reasons that you might want to talk about later, but we can't go there. Because
but in the bill, it says that Tobago is defined by 11 nautical miles within the greater share with a greater share. The one that's being presented now in Parliament, that's going to the committee now.
What I read was that there was administrative responsibility given to Tobago for 11 miles of sea around the island. That's what I read.
Yeah.
But there's a definition that speaks to a certain distance from the low water mark from the island, 11 miles, and that was Tobago's maritime boundaries. Not that it had administrative, the House of Assembly, that is, administrative control over the island, which is there's a difference. Because the government has been saying that, following expert advice, local and international, once a country is an archipelagic state, you ought not to come up with these boundaries between the two islands, because you could lose maritime acreage and therefore your resources. That's what they have argued, right? And so the question that arises is, what is the government's position on the boundaries of Tobago as we speak? Now, they may have cleared it up. What I'm saying is that what they have put out so far is not clear to many who have been reading. What is the version of the bill? Is that clear?
I think I understand what you're saying, but you're trying to allude to the fact that there may be several versions that are out currently.
Well, no,
we're not sure which is the most updated one.
Of the bill. Right. All you have to tell me and you is which version of the bill are we going with? Are we commenting on?
We're commenting on the one that's being presented to the parliament and now to the committee.
Yes. And so why would the Prime Minister talk about the premier then? That is the case. Why? You see, because I have downloaded the file from the parliament website.
All right.
And it says things that are a bit different from the version of the bills I used prior to June 28th.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why I'm talking like this. I may very well be wrong, but what I'm saying is that there's a little confusion among the people I have spoken with, right? They're saying, no, the bill that has been, the bills that have been debated are bills that have a definition that confines Tobago to land mass. That's what they're saying.
No, but there's the one with the administrative 11 nautical miles. That's the one. That's the one we're talking about.
All right, we could talk about that, but we don't know if that is the latest. That's the point I'm making. So okay. You're asking me now whether that is good enough?
Yeah, I mean, my question is that version of the bill, is that one good enough? Can we accept that one and then look to make amendments? Well, that's part of the that's the definition of one thing, but I'm asking about that particular bill. Is it that we can accept that bill, or we should accept that bill and say, all right, we'll make amendments as we go forward?
No, from my perspective, there is stuff there that I don't agree with.
Like what?
And I can talk, like, for example, the definition of the boundaries as you have just articulated.
The 11 nautical miles.
I do not agree that Tobago should be dominated by the national parliament. I do not agree that a number of the areas in the different schedules, there are two schedules that speak to lawmaking capacity and administrative capacity. And even that I'm not clear about. Now, what is it they're saying? That Tobago will no longer have lawmaking capacity? You get that impression from amendments that have been published. But before the publication of those amendments, they've been talking of areas of responsibility, administrative responsibility, and areas of lawmaking responsibility. And there is contradiction across the two schedules, and there are reserved areas that really should belong to Tobago. So I have a problem with the scope of responsibilities, both lawmaking and administrative. Never mind the confusion between the two lists.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you think should be reserved for Tobago specifically?
For example, control over land, state lands. Cabinet takes that onto itself.
Okay.
Transportation between Trinidad and Tobago. There should be something said about Tobago's responsibility in that regard. There should be sharing in that regard. And there are other things that one does not recall immediately because, sometimes it's memory that intervenes. You follow? But that is one of the areas. The question of the definition, as I said, I started off with that.
Yeah.
You, all across the world, between islands, between multi-state or multi-province jurisdictions, and I'm being across those jurisdictions, you have something called the Equidistant Line, or the mean line, the mean distance between the two islands, right? So all you need to do is to draw a straight line between the two islands, right? That's what some people are saying. I agree with those people who say that. And everything north of that line, northeast and north of the line, will be Tobago. And everything south of that line will be Trinidad. What is the big deal? What is the big deal with nautical miles?
Can you break that down for me? Because I am still confused about what is the significance of having more nautical miles or more control over the marine time, the marine arm.
We start off with something called fairness.
Mm-hmm.
If you are going to talk about Tobago's contribution to national development,
mm-hmm.
Tobago has to have a defined space, terrestrial space and maritime space for fairness. And that is a mechanism used across the world, right? The Equidistant Line is used. Now, the government doesn't want to go there because of the arguments I gave you earlier, that the Attorney General has said, for example, Trinidad and Tobago runs the risk of losing maritime acreage and the resources in those miles, right? So that was the first thing to note, that is to say the question of fairness. The second thing to note is that there are resources, hydrocarbon resources in the waters, which Tobago can use as a basis to negotiate a financial position in the budget with Trinidad and Tobago, if you follow what I'm saying. It's not that I'm not one of those persons saying, okay, the resources belong to Tobago. They belong to Tobago in an academic sense because we have territoriality now. Trinidad and Tobago is one territory. So at the current time, the resources belong to Trinidad and Tobago as a country.
Right.
So I want you to note that I am not arguing against that point. What I am saying is that if you want to determine Tobago's contribution to the economic circumstances of the country, you need to properly identify the boundaries.
Right.
And you need to say that it's there. So, when you do that, you will find that Tobago is actually bigger than Trinidad if you include the maritime waters. Yes.
Bigger than you say?
Sorry?
Bigger than you say? As in the contribution is bigger than?
Yes, because when we work it out, right, we come up with Tobago probably, the equation being 60-40 because of the amount of sea.
The amount of sea. Okay. All right. I hear you.
Maritime space. And
well, Dr. James, yeah. Go ahead. We don't have any more time left.
Oh my goodness! You didn't come to talk this morning.
Yeah, the time flies when we're having good discussion.
we have just scratched the surface.
And I think we will definitely have to get back into it because I don't think this bill is going anywhere anytime soon. I think that we have more chance to be able to discuss it. We have at least 2 weeks to be able to make.
But when you call me for a longer period of time because I don't want to. I have to prepare for a meeting like this. You know.
Yeah. Yeah,
I can't just come and sit down and talk. Like I have to prepare myself.
Well, I thought you were in this source so deep that we could just call you and you could be able to.
No, that is also correct. But what I'm saying, it's not enough talking time.
Yeah. Well, we have a limited amount of time on this show. But tell me something before we go. What does autonomy look like to you? What does it look like for people of Tobago? What do they want at the end of the day, besides making a bigger contribution to the GDP?
There are different views, of course, but the views that I espouse are views that include Tobago having its own lawmaking capacity, its own Bill of Rights, yes, that are not entrenched in the Constitution and therefore cannot be interfered with later on down the road. It might look good now. So I'm saying, no, we want our set of rights. We must determine what those rights. Trinidad must not do so as it has done for all of our history of union with Trinidad.
Right.
So that's a major thing for us, right? We think that is the major story there, and in that regard, we need to have a proper definition. And once we do that, the legal mechanics can fall into place because we are talking now about what we have called equality of status and the rights of self-determination. And equality of status for people like me resides currently in the Constitution. Right now, Tobago doesn't have any equality of rights because in the law house is 39-2. We can't do anything about that. All the decisions are made by Trinidad, right? And what we are saying here is that it must be done at the Senate because the Senate is appointed, not elected. Right. And if you equalize the number of senators for both islands, if you say 30 senators in all, and you say 15 for Trinidad and 15 for Tobago, you can have equality of status at that point. It is at that point that you can have an effect on legislation in the country. Unless you have something like that, you can't have equality of status.
Okay, but then if the Senate is meant to represent as well, yes, they are appointed, but they also meant to represent in terms of the various districts that they have in Trinidad and Tobago as well.
No, sir. No, sir. There is no election of
No,
senators.
it's they're appointed, yeah.
They are appointed, and therefore they don't represent anybody except the people who appointed them. So the president has 9 senators there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not saying that they represent the president. They may be independent indeed, but I'm saying they certainly don't represent any district in Trinidad and Tobago that I know. The
Right.
PNM has what, 16?
Right.
They don't represent any districts that I know about. They
But by
represent the PNM
extension,
party.
I mean, but Mr. James, if we're being realistic about it, right?
Yeah.
The parties, the political parties, they go up for election, right? And it's very clear when people vote for their representative, right? And if it is that I am of a political party and I am being sworn into the Senate, I am representing the interests of my party, not so?
No, you represent the interest of your party in the lower house. That's where you are elected, right? Mm-hmm. So there are constituencies represented there. In the Senate, you do the bidding of the government and the opposition that put you there. So, and those numbers are not decided, by the way, by the parties. They are in the Constitution. That's right. What Williams did a long time ago, he and Ellis Clark. You don't remember that, right?
And that's what I wasn't around then, but what you're saying is that you want the change to happen from the Senate perspective, where we can say there's more representation for Tobago in the Senate.
That's correct. And all the guys there will be elected.
Right. And they'll be elected.
And I am proposing also a casting vote by the president to break the thing, right? If there is a tie. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. But at that level, we can have equality of status. Where else can we have equality of status? Ask yourself that question. Where?
Okay, but what if the lawmaking powers for the THA wouldn't give you any sort of equality?
No, all that the government has done there through the JSC, of course, is to say that Tobago has lawmaking capacity on things, okay? Mm-hmm. But they qualify. If there is any law made by Tobago that contradicts any parliamentary law, that law in Tobago will be struck down. In other words, Tobago's lawmaking capacity is constrained in relation to what the parliament wants. And of course, what the parliament wants is normally under the control of the cabinet. Of course, it depends on how many people you have won, how many seats you won in the election. Clearly, that is so. But what I'm saying here is that the parliament reserves the right to contradict any law that Tobago comes up with.
Okay, because it's still central government. All right, I understand what you're saying.
It's still central government. You got the point, yeah.
Yeah. All right, Dr. James, I want to thank you so much for joining us this morning. We will continue this conversation as we continue to review the bills as they are presented and laid in the Parliament, in the Senate, and everywhere.
But we have a little time to go. It's until July 15th.
Yeah, so I suggest that people get to know the bills and if you have recommendations, you send them in as well. I want to thank you so much for.
If you have to keep them reading, because people like me have to keep reading, let them be very clear what version of the bill is before the committees right now. Yeah. And therefore they can comment sensibly, because we don't want to go over ground that we have traveled already.
And the wrong bills, exactly.
And the wrong bills.
Well, Dr. James, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Please stay safe, and we'll be taking a quick break, guys, and come back with more Inside the Now Morning Show. Stay tuned.
Okay, man. My pleasure.
Yeah, man.
I think so.